I want to talk today about family from a cultural standpoint, family theory, um, therapy, all in a multicultural setting. One thing you're going to realize as you go through this curriculum, these courses, is that there's a lot of repetitiveness. You find that in several areas of psychology, a lot of areas actually. I used to teach all the psychologies, uh, and developmental, for example, is rehashed like in abnormal psychology. Introduction to psychology has components of developmental, so on and so forth. And counseling is no different. It's psychology. It's just a branch of psychology, basically, and more geared toward the here and now than the past occurrences. So you hear a lot of this repetitive stuff. Hear things over and over. The difference is that it may be the same material, but it's applied differently. So we're going to get into some stuff that you're maybe vaguely familiar with, may have been mentioned in week 1 and 2, whatever. So bear with it, because as we go through this and bring out the nuts and bolts, you'll see the differences. So family theory, therapy across cultures. That's our chore for the day, and that's all in the context of pastoral counseling. Probably the most influential system in human life is culture, or our families, because they shape identity, they shape beliefs, they shape emotional patterns, they shape communication styles, they shape pure spirituality, relationships. Think of something they don't affect. So in ministry settings, pastors and counselors regularly encounter family concerns, marital conflict, parental struggles, grief, generational trauma. What does that mean? We'll talk about it later. Addiction, you know what that is. Spiritual crisis, cross-cultural misunderstandings. What a toughie. An important reality is that no family exists outside of culture. Culture affects it all. It affects how people define authority, how they express emotions, and how they understand gender roles, respond to conflicts, and if they do or don't seek help. There's cultures out there, I don't want to pick on any of them. African American males and Hispanic males historically have keeping themselves at arm's length from mental health care because it's been told to them over periods of time that indicates weakness. And that's true in a lot of cases, but we all know, hopefully we all know, that really it isn't weakness. We all can use a little mental health now and then, mental health care now and then. Some cultures value independence, individual independence. Others emphasize collective family responsibility. I've had counselors tell me, and psychotherapists tell me, when counseling Hispanic males, that winds up being a family affair because the family comes in for support of their family member, and really even themselves for that matter. Some families openly discuss emotions, others don't. Others value emotional restraint and privacy. Just depends on what you were taught. Think back to your own lives. What was taught to you as far as right and wrong, for example, or when you should go swimming after eating, or whatever the case is. There's a lot of cultural stuff there. We have to avoid, as counselors, assuming that our own cultural expectations are universal. Here's one of those things you've heard. Culture expectations are not universal. Is the general idea? Yeah, the general idea is. But you can't leave it at that. You got to dig into the belief system. So we're going to talk about things like family systems theory, major family therapy models, cultural influences on family life, practical strategies for multicultural pastoral counseling. So get comfortable, get some popcorn and whatever you want to drink, a Coke or water, and away we go. Here's some key concepts to bear in mind. We'll attack some of these. Systems thinking. Maybe you do or don't know what that is. Interdependence. Homeostasis. That covers a lot of areas. Boundaries, roles, triangles, generational patterns. Murray Bowen is one of the well-known theorists. His champion is systems theory. If we have time, we'll get into that. So let's get going. Family systems theory. Excuse me, I'm sorry. Chokes me up talking about this. It's one of the most influential frameworks in counseling and pastoral care. So instead of viewing problems as existing only within an individual person, family systems theory examines relationships, interaction patterns, communication styles, and even emotional processes within the family unit. So this is almost an MFC kind of view in a way. Murray Bowen believed that people can't be fully understood apart from their family systems. So according to systems theory, families operate as emotional units. That is to say that one person's behavior affects everyone else within the family. Stress spreads through the system. Roles often develop unconsciously. You're not sitting there taking notes. And then families seek stability even when the patterns are unhealthy. I could get off onto addiction right now, but I'm not. That becomes, believe it or not, a norm in some families. So what are we talking about here? Homeostasis. You ever heard that word? I'm sure you have. That basically is a fancy word for balance. Your body continually strives for homeostasis, for example. And things happen. You get a headache or whatever. There are reasons behind those things. Homeostasis is a family's tendency, in our case, to maintain balance or stability. The family's tendency. Dysfunctional behaviors can become normal within a family system because they preserve familiarity. As a police officer, I have dealt with crooks, for lack of a better term, who come from a crook background. Their family are all professional bad folk in terms of breaking in, not bad in God's creation, but bad in the fact that that's the norm for their family. How did you grow up? I grew up learning how to break into cars. It's what they actually have specialties, believe it or not. And that's how we get a lot of information. I'm not trying to get off on a tangent. I'm just trying to give you an idea of how powerful homeostasis is. You're raised to be a type of criminal, and you gravitate toward that because it's what your family does. Or you come from a family of alcoholics, or whatever. Homeostasis. This is normal for us, that kind of thinking. A child may become a responsible person in those. A child may become a troublemaker. One spouse may withdraw, the other spouse pursues. What I'm getting at here is you have these various roles that people are trying to work together to either develop or maintain homeostasis. Remember, that means balance. Those things can stabilize a family emotionally. Telling me, Dr. Dasher, that you can be evil and it becomes normal? Yes. Yeah, that's what you do. That's what our family does. We steal cars. It's just the way it works. It's how we get a lot of information. We go ask this member, hey, you know this bunch over here? we've been having some car break-ins over here. Oh yeah, that's Mac so-and-so and his brother. They're all of it. Their dad used to break into houses. He showed them. Happens every day. What about how do we control this? There is a concept called boundaries. Boundaries define emotional and relational limits between family members. Healthy boundaries allow closeness and maintain individuality at the same time. Unhealthy boundaries may be very rigid, emotionally distant, disconnected. They could be diffuse, overly enmeshed with little privacy or independence. I'm not going to give you examples of that because that's a whole class, but use your imagination. You probably know people like this. Pastoral counselors observe boundary problems. And where do we see them? In places like parent and child relationships. My goodness gracious, how powerful is that? Marriage conflicts. You're getting a marriage and family counseling session here. Caregiving responsibilities, church family dynamics, if they even go to church. So Bowen discussed this thing called triangulation. How do we make all this work? A triangle forms, first of all, a triangle can be negative. Triangle forms when tension between two people is redirected through a third person. For example, a married couple in conflict may focus excessively on a child. A church member may pull the pastor into family disputes. These triangles temporarily reduce anxiety, but they often prevent direct communication. What's one of the keys? I hope you've heard this before. I don't know if it's the major key. If it's not the major key, it's way up there. What helps hold a marriage together? And what's the hardest thing in the world to do? Communication. Yes, old people have been married 100 years and they'll tell you, how'd y'all get along? Well, first of all, we didn't kill each other. And then we communicated. We sit down and have discussions, not arguments. Something was bugging one party and they brought it out in the open. And then they went to bed angry. It's another thing they'll tell you. So pastoral counselors pay attention to that. Pastoral counselors look at this triangulation business, but we also look at something else, multi-generational transmission. Now, triangles reduce anxiety, but they prevent direct communication. Well, okay, but multi-generational transmission. So we're talking about not specifically communication, but the passing down of stuff. Trauma, addiction, emotional distance, spirituality, abuse, resilience, that can pass through generations. Why do you do that? Because my family does. Well, okay, it's what they do. There's no question at that moment, is it right or wrong? That may be a given. So how do you begin to penetrate that stuff? Well, we have to look at present behavior, but we have to look at family history. So we want to ask questions, general questions in the beginning. How did your family handle conflict? What messages did you receive about emotions? What spiritual beliefs, if any, shaped your upbringing? What patterns repeat across generations? There are more. That's just an example. That's just an EG for you to think about. Helps counselors move from blame to understanding. Instead of asking things like, what was wrong with this person? Counselors should say, what relational patterns are contributing to this struggle? I tell my my intro to psych classes, when we talk about these kind of things, behavior patterns, and we talk about behaviors in general, in mental processes. Psychology is the scientific study of behaviors and mental processes. And I tell my students, you can see the behavior because that's outside, but you can't see the mental processes because it's in here. What are the emotions doing? People like to say, well, it's in my heart. Well, it's up here. So what are the patterns that are contributing to this upheaval? What's going on in here that's causing these behaviors? You see someone with road rage. I think I used this example before in this class. You see someone with road rage. Well, what's the outer pattern? It's driving erratically and doing the things that people do with the hand signals. I know you know what I'm talking about. But does that mean that person just hates other drivers? Probably not. There's something else going on inside. The mental processes are under attack, and they're taking that stuff out on other people. They may have a bad temper problem or whatever the case is. So that's kind of a wrap really quickly of this business of family systems to get us started. Now, let's get into some therapy models. So you've gotten through this initial contact, these first few visits. Now I want to talk about what are we going to do? What are we going to use as our tool? Major family therapy models. So what are they? Well, I'll give you the headings. Structural family therapy, strategic family therapy, narrative therapy, solution-focused therapy, emotionally focused therapy. And we're going to connect these to pastoral counseling. Those that I just named off are not specific to pastoral counseling. I know this is an ugly word sometimes for us Christian believers, but there's some science in this. We have to be careful of what the science is and what it's telling us. We don't let it supersede our Christian values. So let's look at the first one. Let's look at structural family therapy. What's that all about? Well, Minuchin, if you want a name for it, Salvador Minuchin is the character that developed this. It focuses on family organization, focuses on hierarchy, roles, and boundaries. Healthy families in general maintain clear parental leadership. They set appropriate boundaries. They have flexible structures. What we're talking about here could be called an authoritative family parental leadership. That's what I'm trying to say. Authoritative allows for discussion. Authoritarian does not. So healthy families are authoritative. Clear parental leadership, appropriate boundaries, and flexible structures. What happens when they become too rigid or too diffuse? Children may gain unhealthy authority in the home. That's diffuse. Parents may become emotionally disengaged. That is if you were classifying this as a parenting style, would be a permissive or a dismissive parenting style. And then extended family members interfere excessively. Is it bad for an extended family member to come in to an unhealthy situation and try to help? And the answer is no, dependent upon how that's going to be received. And what's that got to do with family history? So in pastoral counseling, structural awareness helps us recognize unhealthy relationship patterns, including extended families. What do we do to help? Well, we want to improve communications. Boom, there's that big word. Sounds simple, doesn't it? We want to restore healthy parental leadership. If you don't have a responsible parent, you got two jobs now. You got to bring them up to speed, and then you got to teach them how to lead the family. You have to clarify roles and expectations on the part of everybody in the family. And then you want to help reduce relational chaos. This doesn't happen overnight. This stuff takes quite a while, to say the least. Let's move to the second one, strategic family therapy. So we've gone through this kind of a structural family thing. We are looking at the structure. That's where they get their names from. What are we looking at? The structure. Now let's look at strategic. Strategic family therapy, what does it do? It focuses on solving specific problems. This is probably, and this is done through intentional interventions. This is most likely on, as far as you guys are concerned, you guys and gals, what you think of when you think of therapy related to anything. Strategic focus on a specific problem through intentional interventions. Intentional, that means a proactive method. So what do? We look at repetitive interaction patterns. Counselor will ask, what keeps the problem going? What behaviors reinforce the conflict? You get into a lot of personality stuff here. Remember this big word, referral, because sometimes when you start delving into this strategy business, you find out that you've uncovered a different problem. For example, a parent constantly lectures a teenager. The teenager withdraws. The parent lectures more intentionally, and the cycle repeats itself. What are you doing? Creating a vicious circle. It's not going to get better, it's going to get worse. Because the withdrawal can turn into running away. When you study the effects of too much punishment, the Bible says, spare the rod and spoil the child, and that's absolutely true. But the Bible doesn't say beat the child half to death. Psychology says there are two views: no corporal punishment or limited corporal punishment. And then there's a kind of a third shadowy area that says timeout. I'm not going to talk down timeout. For some children, that would work very well, but they're creative. Timeout can't last more than 3 or 4 minutes, then it loses its value dependent upon what's going on. So that's what we have to include here. Too much punishment. If it's corporal punishment, if it's not a lecture, it's a spanking, and then you're probably not going to do that with a teenager, but a younger child you might, and they begin to withdraw, and then because of this, the parent thinks that they're doing something good, so they spank even more. Now you create an abuser potentially grow up, and they're a spousal abuser or they're a bully. So you really have to weigh in the balance how you're doing this stuff. What are we doing with strategic approach? We're trying to interrupt unhealthy cycles. So what do I do as a pastoral counselor? I encourage direct communication. Not this lecture, Mom, you messed up again, blah, blah, blah. You're grounded for 3 years. So we want direct communication. Let's discuss the problem. What are you doing? Why are we having to go through this? Etc. What's troubling you? Establishing new routines. What's a better direction to go in? You can even create accountability structures. That's kind of hard to do, but if you've won the trust of the counselees, yeah, don't dismiss that. And then we want to reduce reactive behaviors. I'm going to leave that one up to you. I'm going to let you do some outside reading about reactive behaviors because it's complicated. What brings them on? What are they? What are the categories, etc. Third type of therapy, narrative therapy. People understand life through stories, and we do. Not like Mary Had a Little Lamb, poetry, things like that, but I'm not trying to make a joke. I'm saying we're talking about serious stuff. People understand life through stories. They develop dominant narratives of their own. We always fail. That's a story. Our family is broken. That's a story. Nobody understands us. That's a story. I'm sure you've met people like that. We do this, nobody understands why. Apply multicultural to this. Look how complicated it can get. We don't eat the same food that you guys eat. We go to bed at a different hour. We worship a different way. We wear different clothes. Our houses are decorated differently. These are multicultural things. What do you do for all these people? As a narrative, if you're using a narrative approach, then you want to separate the person from the problem. Instead of saying you are the problem, you want to reframe it as the problem is affecting your family. Although you can bet your bottom dollar they got some idea maybe that they're part of the problem if they're not a part of the solution. That's an old saying by now. So you have to do this gently. This approach really aligns well with pastoral counseling because faith traditions use stories, testimony, redemption, and identity. So early on, I said this is tough, but it's not as tough as strategic family therapy is, but it can be tough. You got to know what the stories are. Scripture contains narratives of suffering, restoration, forgiveness, exile, reconciliation, hope. That's all addressed in the Bible. You all know that. So this fits very well. Might want to mark this one down somewhere. Keep a 3x5 card. Narrative therapy is what we did back in the day. Rotary file. Okay, enough of that. Solution-focused therapy. It emphasizes strengths rather than pathology. What is pathology? Its root is diseased. Now, diseased is that's a little different. We're not talking about cancer here. We're talking about a pathological thing that's going on, maybe even biological for that matter. So we don't focus primarily on what's wrong. What we do is we focus on what's already working. When is the problem less severe? What strengths exist within the family? I'm going to tell you what this sounds like. Maybe something you've heard of. It sounds like positive psychology, which aims to change your worldview. If I'm negative about everything, then I have a negative worldview, obviously, right? So what we do if you're practicing positive psychology is you take those negatives and you find a bright spot in them. It's hard to do in some cases, but it's work, and sometimes it's a work in progress. It's hopeful and it's practical. It works pretty well with ministry settings. Families arrive emotionally exhausted, and the pastor wants you to focus on things like small, achievable changes, recognize your resilience, and look for spiritual resources. What is that? The Bible or Christian counselors. And then identify existing family strengths. Pretty tough to do. Some cases they're in upheaval. So you're bringing them into a new thought pattern. Emotionally focused therapy. This is used a lot with couples. The emphasis here is on emotional attachment and connection. A lot of the conflicts are rooted in fears of rejection, abandonment, shame, emotional disconnection. So think back to the road rage guy or girl. There's anger, and in some cases, not road rage necessarily, but anger there for sure, but and just day-to-day things, criticism, uh, and then there's even withdrawal. And you look for deeper emotional needs when you encounter these things. So what are we looking for here? We want to look into emotional vulnerability. We want to look into the potential for empathy. We want to produce some empathy on our part. We want to look for secure attachment. We want to look for honest communication. Let me go to bat for secure attachment. Mary Ainsworth, a researcher, and John Bowlby did a lot of research related to attachment. There are only two kinds, secure and insecure. Insecure attachment comes in some sub-flavors. I'm not going to get into all that, ambiguous, so on and so forth. The bottom line is your needs needed to be taken care of from birth. Emotional needs. That's what their studies were all about. If you, from the day you come on the earth till about 1 year of age, if your emotional needs are met, hopefully your physical ones are as well, then you become a trusting human being. I can trust mom or my caregiver, as we say in psychology, whoever your major caregiver is. I trust them because I know that my needs will be taken care of. If they're not, then I form an insecure attachment. Listen, let me tell you something. This doesn't end at the age of 1.5. This goes through the rest of your life. It takes some major changes to change you from insecure to secure. It's much harder to change from secure to insecure, believe it or not. So we're concerned with your attachment. I would ask you questions. This is almost psychotherapy. I would ask you, how was it as you were growing up? Were you taken care of? Erik Erikson's theory addresses this head on. Trust, mistrust, so on and so forth. I need to form a trusting view of the world around me. That doesn't mean you take everything for granted and everything's great. It just means that in terms of those who take care of me, I can trust them. That's secure attachment. And when you have two people together that are securely attached from their background, then you usually have a good working relationship. If you have a mix, you got a problem. And if you have two insecurely attached people, not to one another, but from their background as children, boy, I can't even begin to tell you. Because you got a lot of things going on there. No trust, that's a biggie. Honest communication was the last thing I mentioned right before that, and that's almost a given. For pastoral counselors, we want to work on, we want these people to work on connecting deeply. In what areas? Covenant, compassion, forgiveness. And here's a hard one, reconciliation. And then here's the hardest, trust. When somebody has never been able to trust before, this is a new area for them. They don't know what to expect. Digest that for a minute. I want to jump into culture and family dynamics. And we're not going to spend a whole lot of time with this. What we're talking about here is collectivist versus individualistic cultures. I've mentioned that already. Collectivist, the good for the whole. Individualistic, that's Western culture primarily. It's all about me, me, me. I get ahead. I do this, I do that. I make all the money. Here again, you'll hear something you heard a while ago, gender expectations. What does that mean? It means, what does it mean for you to be a male in your culture? What does it mean for you to be a female in your culture? Those are the expectations. I expect you to do these things, and you're female, I expect you to do those things. Even the words you use. And we also look at religion and spirituality. If you're a pastoral counselor, that's not a guarantee that everybody's coming to see you as a Christian or even a churchgoer. I hope they are. They've been there long enough to know that you can counsel them. But you have to consider religion and spirituality. Religion. Sometimes people make that an ugly word. We're not looking for the side of that definition of religion. We're looking at, do you believe, or what is your stand there? We also have to take into consideration immigration and acculturation. Acculturation, that's adopting into a new culture. What's that culture doing to me, and I'm new here? I can reject it, I can accept it, I can accept parts of it, or I can be confused. Those are the reactions normally. Assimilate, reject, be confused, or totally dismiss. That's become more and more pronounced in these modern times. There are generational differences. The younger people after World War II in Japan, particularly in the 60s and the 70s, began to break away from the Japanese traditions. Why do I know that? Because I was over there a few times in the late 60s. There was still a strong cultural identity to the traditions of the older people, World War II bunch, but the later generations wanted to be westernized, and so they all went about in Levi's and so on and so forth. And that's a direct result of American intervention over there. So generational differences, racial and historical trauma. How was my people treated? How were my people treated? I'll get the English right in a minute. Did we suffer through abuse, or did we get through quite well, or whatever the case is? And then cultural humility. Probably one of the more powerful ones on this list. Go look that up too. That's some more homework for you. So, I guess probably the most important dimension of pastoral counseling, culture. Shapes how families function. It influences the things I mentioned. Communication styles, parenting practices, all that stuff I told you earlier. The collectivist and individualistic thing will trip you up. Individualism is emphasized in Western culture. Independence, personal achievement, self-expression, individual choice for the good of you. In a collectivist culture, family obligations, community obligations are the priority. So what are the values? Different from individualistic in a way. Family honor, respect for elders, which we don't have much of here now. Group harmony, interdependence. In other words, a working group, a group of people that know that they need to work together for the good of everybody. And if you perform individually at a high level in some area, you do that to benefit your village or your family or everybody. Neither one is superior, but the more frequent culture in the world is collectivist. So what does that do to you as a counselor? Again, don't assume your culture is the norm. and that it's universal, because it isn't. Maybe norm here, but it's not necessarily the norm in Zimbabwe. You might interpret strong family involvement as unhealthy dependence, when it's in fact a major thing in collectivist cultures. Cultural values, loyalty and connection, those are the two big words. About gender roles, different cultures define masculinity, femininity, marriage, parenting, authority. They view those differently. Each culture has its own definition of that. You have to approach those things as a pastoral counselor very carefully. You don't want to insult or put someone off because you don't understand. Ask questions. You still have to maintain ethical and theological convictions. Doesn't mean you can't ask questions. Listen. I remember reading a note that said, listen before you judge. Well, let me change that. Listen and don't judge. I don't know what counselor would have said before you judge. You don't ever judge. If you're going to be effective, you have to work in an understanding, parentheses, context. And then what else we have to worry with? Worry with as in a good way, religion and spirituality. What's faith do? It provides hope. What's Christianity other than being what we know it is? It's also an identity. People say, I am a Christian. It gives meaning. It gives support. It gives moral structure. So faith does a lot of things. But guess what? Spiritual beliefs for some people can become a source of shame, rigidity, can be fearful, can even cause conflict when it's misunderstood or misapplied. How would you misapply it? That's a tough one for me. Thinking you're better when you have a plank in your eye. That's not me. I don't go around with a plank. Well, I probably got some planks in my eyes. But I don't want to misapply things, and I don't think you do either. So what do? We want to help families distinguish between healthy spirituality and harmful spiritual misuse. Accusatory. Well, you shouldn't have done that because that makes God mad. Those kind of attitudes. Immigration and acculturation create more stress. Immigrant families, for example, have different experiences. Language barriers, economic stress, loss of community. Think about it. You're removed from what was familiar. Identity confusion. Generational tension. I want to look at identity confusion for you for a minute. They're not who they were back there, although they are. What? What did you say? Your identity changes when you move to a different place because you're not the majority anymore. Now you're a minority. What do you think that immigrants group together? That language, cultural likeness, stuff they're used to without getting deeply involved in that. Identity confusion, very tough. James Marcia did a study of identity crisis. And Eric Erickson addresses that as well, and talk about identity and how you establish that. Children adapt sometimes more quickly to surrounding culture, by the way, than the parents do. Children kind of, I don't know, weird little things. They can either make things really good or they can make things really bad. And they're more, I think in general, you will find if you put a group of adults together, a group of children together, who's going to play first? The children are going to play with each other probably first once they feel things out a little bit. Adults are carrying more baggage. So what are the conflicts? Values, education, religion, autonomy, even like dating. I know folk here in my area. There's an Albanian family, and their ideas of dating, that particular family, I don't know about all Albanians, but their idea of dating is a lot different. How about Hasidic Judaism? If you know anything about Hasidic Judaism, your mate is selected for you. Hey, I made a deal. We consulted Yenta, and she made a deal for us with so-and-so. So you're going to marry her son. We've put this marriage together. And you're telling this to a 9-year-old. They're not going to get married at 9, but that's once they get up to. That's the old days. So, values, dating, education, religion, autonomy. What is autonomy? Independence. That can be affected. We have to recognize the emotional strain that comes with all that. Cultural transition, historical and racial trauma, going through our list. Oppression, discrimination, colonization, poverty, violence. People that have come through that, those are known as intergenerational wounds, where you've come from a background that may be affected by one of those things I named. Colonization's a wild one. That's not as pronounced as it was at one time. Still recognized, but it's not like the days when we were conquering everything. There's territorial problems. India and Pakistan are constantly arguing over their territory. I think the two tribes that I did a study on in Africa, Tutsis and Hutus, I think, battle over area and battle over beliefs, kill each other over that stuff. Trauma affects family trust, emotional regulation, safety. What's your worldview? Counselors have to avoid minimizing these realities. These are real things for people. It may be the sheer thing that's causing the upset. Cultural humility is something that we have to exercise. Remaining teachable, in other words, learning from your client. Listen respectfully. Acknowledge limitations on your part and theirs. And never, ever, never stereotype. Instead of assuming, you need to ask questions. Remember, I said that early on. What does a family mean in your culture? How are conflicts usually handled? What role does faith play in your family life? What values are most important to your family? I just finished a class, multicultural psychology class, undergraduate class. And at the end of the session, the spring 2 session, I made a list. There were 7 items on the list, and it was things like this. What's a tradition in your culture that is widely practiced, and where did it come from? What's a food that your culture eats at specific times, etc., so on and so forth. All these things that make up who they are. And it was probably one of the most interesting, I'm going to pat myself on the back, probably one of the most interesting ideas that I've come up with and incorporated, and it really worked well. I learned a lot from listening to them. It's a pretty large class, too. It's about 20 students. So let's make pastoral counseling applications our last little bit here. It's been a long lecture. Applications for us. Empathy. You know what that is? Not sympathy. It's empathy. I understand I've been through it. Shared experience. But don't say I know how you feel. Don't ever say that. Spiritual integration. That's a given. Ethical boundaries, another given. I mentioned this a while ago. Referral awareness. And then just practical ministry care. You can't say things like, just pray more. They've probably been praying their brains out. Excuse me. Prayer, scripture. Been talking too long. Confession, forgiveness, etc. All things you're familiar with. These are things to consider. Sorry about that. Happens when I talk this long. Okay, so with that in mind, I hope that this is enlightening for you. Email me if you have questions. Read the book. You can read Murray Bowen or Salvador Munchin, Monica McGoldrick. These are just a few. Larry Crabb, Goodwin. Read about his effective biblical counseling. It's one of the textbooks we use, by the way. David Benner, Strategic Pastoral Counseling. These are all aids for you. If you need me to repeat them, I can. All right, so I hope this wasn't too long for you. And soon I'll be seeing you with something new, something else that'll be hopefully exciting. And we'll continue our journey. So take care.